We're going, there we go, sort of. So what we were thinking of for today, it's inner fitness today in Soul Cafe. And what we were thinking of as a topic was subtlety. And sort of see where that takes us. So let's begin with reflection. As I sit here, looking out through the physical eyes, allowing my physical senses to shape my experience, I'm really only observing on the surface, only seeing what is there physically, what the physical senses can perceive. And even then, I am aware that I am missing a lot of information. I'm not just looking through my physical eyes. I'm looking through the lens of all my preferences and biases and past experiences. I am looking through the physical eyes and a distorted lens. What would enable me to see more clearly, completely, and, if you will, more subtly? Not just on the surface, and not just shaped by my own inner state. What enabled me to see what is really there? For that, I have to open my inner subtle eye. The one that can see beneath the surface, not just through the physical senses. And I always start with myself. When there are thoughts or feelings or reactions from within, can my inner eye see beneath the surface what's driving those thoughts and feelings and reactions? Am I able to see the multiple layers of the self, from the superficial to the deep? And one thing that I can feel is important in improving my vision, my sensitivity to the subtle, is becoming quiet inside. Allowing those biases and preferences and past experiences to fade into the distance, going beyond, becoming very quiet. This improves my inner eye, the one that can get to the seed and the root of what is going on inside. Om Shanti. Capacity to see, experience the subtle. I remember sometimes in dance class, And again, with inner fitness, the idea being to take something that we have in physical fitness and then see how that looks in spiritual fitness, fitness of I, the soul. Something in dance class is we'd be given choreography. And the idea was then to execute the choreography. And, looking on the surface, someone watching would say, wow, two dancers, they look, or the instructor and the students, they look like they're doing exactly the same thing. And I'm looking and saying, no, they're doing something completely different. Even though on the surface, their arms and legs are all in the right place, it was very, very different what was going on. And so when we look just at the physical example, what does it mean to have an eye to the subtle when we're just looking at the physical? I know we want to move into spiritual, and we will, but because it's so much more concrete, it's useful to start with the physical. So when we're looking at physical movement, what does it mean to have an eye to the subtle, and why would I want to have an eye to the subtle? What does that mean? Any ideas?
What came to my mind when it comes to the physical aspect is the very foundation of the movement. And it comes with the alignment, going to the, awareness of working the core. And then comes balance, agility. And when we know the foundation, we are targeting, the actual and there's purpose of that movement, and that prevents injury or any other sort of stuff that, could worsen. So I would say the very foundation, we're looking at the foundation of the movement.
So two things, an eye to the subtle, meaning to be looking at the foundation, the alignment, the core, and the reason why I might want to is one of them definitely to help avoid injury. So proper execution, so I'm less likely to have pain or harm, in this case, to the body, which I, the soul, would experience through the body. So I don't experience that. Great, thank you, Pauline. Anything else? An eye to the subtle.
That's what I would have shared too.
Isn't it interesting? Just came from, sorry, were you going to add more?
If something comes on, let you know.
Okay. Just came from a training session, and there were a few things that really intrigued me in what happened there. The session had two parts. One was dance-based movement, and the second was on a portable piece of equipment called the TRX trainer. So very much core-based body weight activity. And in the first half, the dance movements were very Om Shanti, back to Vancouver Island. The dance-based movements were very often quick. They're driven by the beat of the music. Sometimes they're slow. And it led to a very interesting conversation. I know we've had it before in other moments, but they were asking, after a while they said, I'm just going to do a piece of this because to get it all firing at the same time, I'm finding challenging. But they were asking, how do I get the movements to go that sharp and clean to the beat of the music? And so we said, it's all core. It all depends. And then they were sharing, it's interesting. When I was in dance, they were sharing ballet. I was always told I had very nice flowing movements because I wasn't using my core. So I just sort of flowed around. I said, and what if you had to flow and suddenly stop, or flow and decelerate? They said, no, that didn't go very well. Right? Again, what role the core plays. So then we were chatting about two dancers I knew. One was the instructor, the other was their demo person. And the instructor was very compact, very tiny body. And their demo person was the opposite, very tall, long limbs. The instructor liked choreography, was very sharp and quick because it suited their body type, right? They're very explosive and small. So their movements were extremely sharp and quick choreography. And I remember the first time I saw their demo person, I thought, how is he going to do this? He's got these long limbs. He's very tall. This is going to be a nightmare. But I was amazed at how well he was able to do these sharp, like his core was incredible to have that kind of control. But there was one day I remember, like, the choreography was really intense. Like, it was a little, every time we had a guest class from him, I'd always get him, I'd get a little nervous because it was like, am I going to be able to do this? I mean, it's just so challenging. One time when the demo person was doing it, and you just go off by one beat and you lose the whole thing, right? And so he was off, and he got so frustrated with himself. All I remember is him going banging the wall really powerfully because it required such incredible concentration and core to be able. Now, someone watching would see us all appearing, our arms and legs seem to be in the right place, but under certain circumstances, the choreography almost weeded out whether or not our core was firing. We just wouldn't be able to execute it. You know, instead of that double pirouette, maybe there was no pirouette. It just wasn't going to be possible. So this idea of having this remarkable pain-free control in movement depends on what's going on in the subtle, and not to be deceived by the wow factor. And the wow factor is what appears to be going on the surface. We are very easily deceived by the surface, the wow factor. Wow, they just seem to be, it's like, yeah, but have you really looked at what's going on there? No, because it would require an eye to the subtle. And the second experience was very interesting, going into a specifically intentional mind-body class. And there is such a deeply held belief that mind-body classes are lesser in terms of difficulty, in terms of strength, in terms of training results, that they're at a lesser. This is a highly, you can feel it. You can just feel that this is a deep. So the ones of us that were in here, you know, we just felt so remarkable at the end of the class, and could feel the effect this had on the body, having that deep sort of attention on alignment and lengthening and range of motion, all of the things that are the foundation of movement. There's nothing wrong with high intensity classes, but again, am I deceived by the wow factor? Do I think that I'm making more gains through the big, ballistic, powerful stuff because there's grunting and sweating and all sorts of things going on? Do I appreciate the value of the subtle work that is the foundation of the other work? Do I really appreciate it? And eventually I'm weeded out. Eventually it is weeded out. So how does that translate into spirituality?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, like, maybe I'm jumping ahead too much, but just the example you were giving about being able to see that alignment in that core work, would that be a function of our intellect, even though we're not, your souls aren't soul conscious? Because like for some, they can't see that. So it's not really, I don't know if it's really invisible from them.
Definitely. And I think that, welcome, Hema. Yes. So Hema's sharing, I lost capacity to use subtle eye. So this is the first reason. And that's very connected to what Nora was just asking. So what happens in dance is we actually get training. So in other words, this can be trained. It's trainable. Just so we don't throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, I guess I don't have an eye for the subtle, so I'm hooked. No, it can be trainable. I have to have the interest. I have to see the value. But once I have the interest, value, then I start to put myself into situations where I am training that capacity. Because yes, it requires what we call the intellect, or that eye for the subtle, the eye to sense the invisible. We even often, this function of the soul called the intellect, we even often say it will feel, even though we call it the eye, the spiritual eye, we say it feels. It feels because it doesn't think. It's not intellectual. It can feel, it can sense. So the sensitivity, we call it coming back to your senses as that inner eye starts to awaken, so that we can actually appreciate what's going on under the senses. Even as I was driving back here to where I am now this afternoon, and I know I'm mentioning this, I know it's a very sensitive topic, so I don't want to go into all of that, but as an example, as I was coming, I could see there was, and this happens when I come back here every Saturday afternoon at this time in Canada anyways, there's always protests starting to gather at this time on Saturday afternoon. So I always have to negotiate a little bit to be able to drive back here in time for this session, because I have to navigate through the protesters. And I always find it interesting because it has a very clear vibration. And you can sense it, that this isn't so much about the issue as about the souls. It's attracting a certain type of soul. They could be protesting about anything, is what I'm suggesting. It's just these souls that have a certain level of feel of discontentment and want something to gather around, to express that. You can just feel it in the vibration. If I look on the surface and think, okay, they're gathering to protest on this particular issue, but what do I feel under the surface is this is attracting a certain type of soul. Again, I'm not judging in any way, I just know it's attracting a certain type of soul to do this. So that's what's going on under the surface. And I've noticed that in general, when people comment on social media or anything, it appears that it's about the issue if I'm looking on the surface. But if I can feel under the surface, it's more about the soul than about the issue. There's many ways to respond to something that's going on. It does not have to be anger and hatred and judgment. It does not have to be rebellion and violence. There's other ways. And it always will reflect more about the soul than about the issue. How do I respond to anything in my life reflects on me, the soul, than it does necessarily the issue. So feeling under the surface. But to feel the subtlety does require that sense be activated. So what we notice, and this is probably to me one of the main benefits of regularly attending mind-body classes or regularly engaging in more core or deep work when it comes to the physical movement, is it starts to train that sensitivity. It starts to train it. And for me, it's a little bit frustrating, I suppose, because I didn't come from an anatomy or physiology background. I didn't go to university in that. And of course, really people only feel that's who would be trained. I came from a dance background, so we didn't learn the names of body parts or anything like that, but we were trained to be aware of the subtle. So although I can't give the name of things, I can certainly speak to the experience of what's going on. And so because we were trained to do that, we all came in with it completely untrained. We had no idea as children, little children, of what was going on. And if you ask a little child to do a push-up, it really doesn't go well because they just don't have that sensitivity. But over the years, because of so much focus and practice, you don't go into a ballet class and talk about it and leave the room. You go into the ballet class, you're told a few things, but more than anything, you practice. And this is the struggle in spirituality, is we talk and not necessarily practice.
I find that fascinating that there's training in something so subtle.
Yeah.
But they can't acknowledge it's spirituality
Mhm.
because they wouldn't. But the same thing as like I had a physiotherapist, a coworker.
Mhm.
I had like this huge baggy, hoodie on and like baggy pants, and I was walking by, she's like, Nora, that is excellent alignment. I'm like, how can you see?
Yeah.
And it always stayed with me because, I don't know if souls can acknowledge that that's not a physical thing.
I mean, it's really putting you ahead of the game. If even physically you're used to that, if anything, you'll be very hungry. Oh, artistic practice also attune the soul to subtle. Exactly what we're saying. Yeah, that it gives you a bit of a head jump, a head start, because you're used to the subtle and you're almost interested. It's not saying that you necessarily have it when you come to spiritual, but you know the value of it. You're interested in it. You want to master it, and you want to practice so you can master it. So I've noticed those who come from a physical background get very frustrated if they're not practicing. They like to talk, they like to get lessons, but they say, okay, but I need to practice this. Tell me what I need to practice. How does this look and integrate into my day? Because they're so used to, getting hands on. It's not satisfying for them. And it's very interesting. Another spiritual student was sharing that she was talking to a soul who said that they could listen to classes all day long. And eventually one day came when the soul who likes to listen to classes because the other one was saying, who comes from a fitness background, was saying, oh my gosh, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't sit and listen to classes all day long. And the one who does like to eventually they were chatting again. She says, I have notebooks full of notes from classes I have listened to all day long. But I had to look one day and ask myself, out of all these notes, what have I mastered? And it's not, again, to dismiss the value of those classes, but eventually, in order for that sensitivity to come to life, I've got to practice. It's a training. It's challenging because it's a spiritual training, so it's very invisible. But it really means I take those simple fundamentals, in this case, I am a soul, and how much am I actually experiencing that, not talking about it? Because that's been the struggle bit, as it's mental, knowing instead of doing. Exactly. How do we translate it? We need to get the instruction. There's no doubt about it. It's not to dismiss the importance of knowledge. We're nowhere without it. If someone doesn't come along and say, you're a soul, let me tell you the essence of what that means, you're not the body, etc., all the different pieces, you're eternal. So that needs to be communicated to me. And now it's like, experience it. And this is when things get interesting for us, because it's like, I know how, and I have to start somewhere. That quiet time where I sit and I'm very active. I've always appreciated this aspect of the practice in Raja Yoga, open-eyed meditation. It's not about whether the eyes are physically open or not, but it suggests there's something active going on. When the eyes close, and sometimes they do because you're so absorbed in the experience, and that's fine, but sometimes when they close, I feel like nothing is going on. I'm not doing, I've sort of slipped into this very passive place, whereas I'm actually really awakening to the experience. Whoa, I'm not this body. And it requires such stillness to allow that experience to come into focus. It's not enough for me just to have the thought, I'm not this body, and move on and say, check. It's like, okay, wait, stop. I have to feel that. I want to feel that. And there's going to be a lot of resistance to feeling it because the familiar is going to pull back. So it was quite funny when we were in the session again with this client, the second half, after the dancey first half, the second half was body weight, core work. I felt for them because they're very sweet. So their younger sister, they bring their younger sister. She doesn't join us often, but she's quite shy. So it's nice for her to come and have this interaction. And so she's there watching. Her younger sister also has a lot of dance background. And so this poor older sister who we're training is getting criticism from both sides. I'm trying to correct her as the trainer. And then her younger sister's saying, oh, you're doing this wrong. I'm like, okay, but this is classic how we are, right? We're so good at looking at other people, right? We're so good and just criticizing. We don't actually give any solutions to help them. We just say what they're doing wrong, which I think is kind of funny. But it was very interesting. And she's such a lovely older sister that she didn't care. She was happy that her younger sister was engaging, which was sweet. So if you're looking under the surface, you're seeing the beauty of the dynamic. You're not just seeing a younger sister criticizing an older sister. You're seeing the maturity of the older sister and the engagement from the younger sister. And it was quite beautiful. So you're kind of just supporting that younger sister coming out of her shell and the older sister having the maturity to know how important that is, even though it's quite humiliating. So kudos to both of them. But the second half was very, very alignment core based. And there was one point when she was, and this I think is the beauty of our own training, is that again, deceived by the surface or the wow factor, is they'll do an exercise and you can tell they're, you use the word, they're cheating a little bit. There are ways to cheat to pull off an exercise. So then the job is to do a progression or a version of the exercise that minimizes the opportunity to cheat. Sometimes drama throws this at us, and we don't like it because it makes us uncomfortable. But it's basically throwing a scenario at us that's going to sort of weed out or distill out the ways that we might be cheating or deceiving ourselves. If we can look beneath the surface and see the opportunity here, it's helping me to clean up my act, right? I've been sort of rationalizing, getting away, not quite having the foundations in place. This scene in the drama is helping to clean that up. And so when we were doing the exercises with the soul, it's like, okay, well, let's try this progression. And it was funny because the whole thing just fell apart when we tried just a subtle adjustment on the exercise. And they're looking at me like, why can't I do this? I could do the other one, but when I do this one, I completely lose my balance. And I said, yeah, so what's going on? And then for them, they were trying to figure out, what do I need to do to correct the alignment? It was really a struggle, and you could just see it was like, am I able to discern what's happening, why I'm going off, what's going on? And eventually they started to, again, be sensitive to that, figure it out. So it's really strengthening or training that muscle. If I was looking at the surface, I would just get frustrated and say, I can't do the exercise and maybe give up. But if I'm interested in developing that subtle, it's like, oh, this is revealing the weakness I have here. Am I able to see like so much opportunity to figure out what's going on? And again, this happens in life. If I'm in a situation which I'm finding uncomfortable, very often we just want to avoid it. But can we see that what is going on here? Why is this so uncomfortable for me? At the foundation, what do I need to cultivate? And 10 times out of 10, of course, in spirituality, we say soul consciousness, but it's really being able to, when I'm in solitude, practice and use different situations to train that eye to the subtlety, use the situations, not go for the wow factor. And we often will go for the wow factor, the surface, in spirituality. We like to look good. We like to look spiritual. I've got it going on. I've got my whites on. I'm walking and sitting a certain way. Everything's wonderful. I'm speaking softly. It's fantastic. I used to laugh when I would see, she was a second administrative head of the organization, Dadi Prakashmani. She was so wonderful in her behavior in busting myths about spirituality. I really found it so refreshing to observe her. And it was very natural, and you could feel the depth of spirituality in that soul. But she would be like, when she was reading our morning spiritual class, she'd be like just like quite loud. And it wasn't this sort of, oh, I remember once being in a program, it was in New York, and a soul in the audience. At the end, they decide to put their hands. We asked any questions. But then, why do all of you speak that way? I said, which way? And they said, that kind of monotone song. I found it so funny, because it's true. A lot of us do. Some it's coming from a very genuine place, and some it's coming from the surface. I'm trying to act spiritual versus it's really coming from that genuine place. When I'm in the alignment, this is how I express myself. That's only for me to sort out. If it's coming from a genuine place, I have nothing to worry about. It's continue on. But if it's not, I have to sort of check in. But Dadi Prakashmani was just so not extrovert, but very expressive and engaging. It used to make me kind of laugh. She's almost like a comedian up there. But such a depth of spirituality that it was coming from. It's coming from sheer joy, absolute power and joy. Very sincere place. So if I'm copying on the surface, drama will eventually come along and correct me, if you will. And perhaps if I'm lucky, I will see it as an opportunity to check in. Otherwise, I'll just be frustrated. But to really be able to have that eye to the subtlety for the self. What am I practicing during my seated times? What's actually going on? And this is why we have open-eyed. I really want to be engaged, really engaged, and ideally always progressing, always progressing. Whatever worked yesterday, I want to build on that today. Always progressing on that subtle exercise. But the other piece, of course, is integration. What's going on as I act and interact? Is it coming from that sincere, subtle place? Or have I gone back to the surface, the wow factor? So that's something that I need to look at with respect to the self. This obviously will color how I'm looking at others, the empathy I have for others. Again, it's just remarkable how much we judge others, how critical we are. It's just it's embarrassing, really, how much pollution can be going on in there. But if I'm developing this understanding, and if I am sincerely practicing at that foundation level, then I leave others alone in my head. We call it being a detached observer of others' parts. I just leave them alone. I don't have to have a running commentary. If anything, I just need to have very respectful feelings. I don't need to have a running commentary on what others are or are not doing. Yeah.
Feels like maybe, I'm sure it is the case with physicality, but it seems much more, maybe I shouldn't say, it seems much more obvious in spirituality that you would need a lot of self-respect to let go of the wow factor.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if souls know what that means, but like you can't really be taking the shortcut or cheat in some sort of way as if there is progress. And not that there's no progress when it's the incognito, but that's why I was really feeling you need a lot of self-respect, because something to override ego.
Yeah, to me, that is what spirituality is, as its core, is pure feelings to the self or self-respect. And the second class I was involved in, the mind body, it was really lovely because, of course, we want to grow and challenge, etc. But each of the souls in that room, physically speaking, came into that role with a different story of injuries and issues that they are aware of. And so we'll be doing an exercise, and if one is going for the wow factor, or as you said, lacking that self-respect, trying to impress, we're given a progression, and they'll try to do the highest level of that progression. Even if it's not well aligned, even if it's painful, Whereas, the instructor will give permission and demonstrate. And it was lovely to see everyone in that room do the progression that worked for them. Given the story of their own injuries and asymmetries, etc., it was really, they still were challenged. They were still able, by doing that progression, to do it well aligned, to take benefit. So that's a very, can I let go of trying to impress others and be more interested, given that the point A I am starting from, more interested to grow in such an honest way. And that does require a real comfort with the self, absolutely. And I think then there would be more empathy. That's the only way I can have respect for others, we know, is if I have self-respect. So there will be that respect for others. And I won't have that vision of they're going to have to prove themselves to me either. You will create spaces where they can work honestly themselves, give them permission to. So it always, however I am working with myself, whatever honesty I have in working, I still want to challenge, I still want to grow, I still have to, be developing, but in such an honest way. And if I train that way, then it automatically, I've noticed, watching so many trainer-client relationships, it's remarkable how the trainer trains themselves is how they train their clients. It is absolutely, it's kind of a wonder to watch. We had one trainer who can lift very heavy, but has had to get there through multiple injuries. So they're wonderful at moving people from point A to point B. They don't just scream them into point B. They move people from point A to point B. So it's really rewarding for people. And they get incredible education and understanding along the way. I've seen other trainers who just grit and grunt and literally talk to themselves as they're training themselves. Like they're talking out loud. They're yelling at themselves as they're training themselves. That's how they train their clients. And there's other trainers who are extremely sensitive to injuries, etc. And they're very creative in how to resolve those injuries, very creative. And this is how they train their clients. So it's really, for me, it's very sad for my clients because spirituality is my interest. So there's inevitably going to be a chunk of time in the training session where we're not doing anything physical and we're just talking about spirituality. I feel sorry for them because I hope they don't feel they're wasting their money, because this just always happens. I say, wow, this is really interesting spiritually. It always happens when there's a chunk of time where we're just, sort of training the soul. So it's so, however I train self is going to definitely reflect on how I interact with others, my attitude towards others. So if it's very important to my heart to be genuinely respectful, not a show, not doing nice gestures, but at the level of attitude and vision, to really be respectful, then I better cultivate self-respect. It's not going to be possible otherwise. It'll just be show. I do nice things, I talk about the nice things I do, and on it goes. And it's really not, it's at the surface, and I am deceiving myself and others.
I think a lot of times, too, spiritually speaking, we find ourselves in scenes where we have to ask ourselves, do I have an injury? Do I want to just glaze over it? Do I want to do the wow factor? But there's an injury.
Yeah.
Right? And
drama will eventually catch up with you. It will eventually be merciful and shut it down, which is merciful, because it's amazing how long we can get away with it if we're left to our own devices. So, will I have the wisdom to recognize this is a good thing in the drama? Not always. That this is beneficial? Not always, right? I'll just say this horrible thing happened. And drama is saying, actually, you were quite self-destructive for a while. We had to destroy your self-destructiveness with this particular scene. So do I recognize that? That again depends. Is my eye for the subtle working, which is the third area, is how I respond to scenes and situations around me. So there's a self, a subtle eye towards the self, which infects the subtlety with which I see others. But then there's also being able to read the subtlety in scenes and situations unfolding around me. And that, again, depends on my training. In the study of Raj Yoga, we say every scene that unfolds is beneficial. Do I genuinely always feel that way? That every scene is beneficial.
If we did, we would be perfect.
We'd be happy all the time, right? So really, am I upset, destabilized, confused, disoriented, emotionally affected by any scene that, oh, that person said this to me, or that scene unfolded, this didn't happen, this did happen, didn't go the way I want, should have gone this way, all this type of thing. Certainly had the last couple of years, lots of opportunity to practice this one or check in on this one. Every scene is beneficial. Of course, we say that when things go the way we want. And that's, of course, part of the secret is our lives have been based, at least in recent times, totally on the fulfillment of desires. That has been the source of our so-called happiness. To the point that, we are engaging in dysfunctional behavior, but it continues and continues. Eventually, drama says, for your own welfare, this can't continue. You are going to destroy yourself if this continues. So we're going to throw some curveballs in there. I remember once we had, we still do, it wasn't addressed, but there was an injury. And so the physio was trying different things to address it. One of them was he had me stand on an unstable surface called a Bosu trainer. It's this half dome. And when you turn it upside down and stand on the flat platform, you're kind of all wobbly, if you can imagine. You're just kind of all over the place. So he had me stand on a half dome, and he stood maybe 4 or 5 feet away, maybe further, and he would just throw a ball at me. And he started by throwing it directly at me, just so I could sort of get used to it. And I'm saying, oh, this is going great. And then suddenly he threw one way over there. I'm like, whoa! And so I had to kind of go and, and they threw one way over there. And I'm like, what? And you know what he's doing. He's checking your core stability. Can you stay on top of this thing and kind of go on, so wonderful exercise. Do things get, are they just where you want them to go? I mean, we get curveballs all the time. Do I remain stable? And does the stability, is it depending on what's going on outside? Or is it because I have that inner stability? This was the physical example, but internally, as much as I practice or train in experiencing what is eternal, that is constant, that is how I build stability spiritually. I have to become very quiet and experience what is eternal. Those 3 big questions. Who am I? Who do I belong to? What really is going on? What's the big picture? As much as I can go into the experience, not the thoughts or the intellectualism, but the actual experience, go there, go into that world. As much as I can, I'm building core stability. So that when the temporary changes, which is will, I have a foundation, an anchor.
I think that's why I was reminded of Daddy Janky. And I was thinking about self-respect because it's so easy to compare yourself to others, which is like poison.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about karmically speaking, we have these injuries, and if you're just looking at the surface, and if you just compare yourself, I know it was a challenge for her at the beginning. I came late compared to everyone else, but there was so many obstacles in her
Mhm.
life. If she just stayed that way and compared, like there is no way that she'd be able to move forward because it would
Yeah.
always feel like she was at a disadvantage. So I
Um,
was feeling that about
yeah.
uncovered too.
You know, Daddy Janki was such a fascinating soul in her own right. Her inner eye was extremely well developed. I used to feel she could x-ray, but she also she surrendered that inner eye to God's task. So God actually used her intellect, even though it was well developed in its own right, so that she would be in a gathering, and you could tell she wasn't thinking about it. She just would say or do things, and they'd always weed out the thing that needed to be addressed. There's that wonderful story I've told a few times about, they would say that she didn't speak English. We all know that is, we're not sure about that one. I mean, she gave a whole address at the United Nations in English, but she could, of course, speak some English. Reading it, probably, we always know that reading it might not be as good, but she, that at Global Cooperation House where she was based, and it was lovely how that team functioned, always that deep respect, always checking everything with her first. And they still have that system, checking everything, no matter how big or small. And so they would create promotional pieces, flyers, printed pieces in English, because this is in London. And they would show them to her first. If it was a flyer that was to be mass produced, they show it to her. Again, English is not her mother tongue, but they would show it to her, and she would be able to find the error. She'd say, fix this. It's really interesting what's going on there. So it's always this sense of, you can imagine like I always pretend, the feeling it always gives me was a Stradivarius violin, top of the line instrument. In its own right, it's a wonder, but in the hands of a master, what kind of music will that instrument create? So again, incredible subtle eye. Could completely see into the depths of a soul, what's going on, and would speak to souls differently because they could see that. But then in the hands of God, the wonders that could happen around the subtle. So it's really, a really interesting story. And that soul, we know, they've said it themselves, they had a deep love for developing their intellect. They knew it was the end all be all, right? That is the point of the relationship with God, is to develop that subtlety, because it is the foundation of good choices, a happy life. So to be able to develop it, to really use God to help me train that, she shared, that's what I want from God, is a divine intellect, a good eye. And definitely she developed that, and it kept getting better and better because she surrendered it to his task. So there's so many aspects of how to, however far that, however far my intellect can reach, because we all have different ones with different range, but let me train it to the optimum by practicing, making sure I'm actually not just thinking about eternal truths, but I'm actually experiencing them. And even that is challenging for us to figure out. Am I thinking about them, or am I actually doing them, experiencing them? We have to do spirituality. Not just think about it, but actually do spiritual. I have to do soul consciousness. I know that seems like an odd partnering of words, but kinesthetically, concretely, something needs to be happening there. This incredible level of detachment that I experience, liberation. So doing soul consciousness, that I have to check, but also, am I using it? Am I using that subtle eye as I interact with others and situations? That will also start to strengthen it. Same in physical training. I have these artificial moments where I want to refine it, different exercises, but then I want to make sure that all that work isn't going to waste as I come into functional day-to-day life. I'm still activating all that alignment work. Because souls will do a bunch of work in the gym, and then it's as if nothing happened when they go into day-to-day life. So really have to check, honestly, what's going on in those two levels. So I'm looking at the time. I'd love to leave a moment if there's anything that anyone wants to share before we finish. Yes, go ahead, Pauline.
I was touched by the soul who is the instructor this morning for the cycling class, because she said, find your inner strength. And it automatically reflected on me, okay, what's inner strength is. And I know from the study, we learn about the soft power versus the physical power. It really resonated with me because automatically I was really focusing on engaging the core, working on those stabilizer while cycling. And then ego comes in and like, okay, I have to put more because I want to work hardcore. And then the soul conscious state say, no, it's painful for you. And I did cycling yesterday. I had so much power, but today I had only this amount of power. And being honest and being pure in my intention, just to compete with what I did yesterday or the present moment. And that realization of being honest to myself was really very beautiful, because I started to let go, of, we'll say, like working hardcore more than being honest to yourself that you are working on the foundation, engaging the core. It doesn't need to be really, super hard, but work on your comfort level. And it's so beautiful because it went so smoothly. And then as I look around, there's different souls working on their own level too. And having that understanding and acceptance for myself, whatever everyone is doing, I know they don't see like they're working so hard, but I can see the effort, the purity from how hard they work. It doesn't look like they're working hard, but I feel that, they're working so hard. So it's like more of the subtlety of being detached if someone is working hard or not. But it's just beautiful experience to realize that on your own, and then seeing on others that someone may have an injury, if they're not sweating or not, if they're breathless or not, it doesn't matter. And it's very relatable of what we're talking about, the subtlety, being detached and being true to yourself. And that's the very essence and core of who we really are.
Yeah, it's lovely what you shared, because when we are, it seems to be a bit of a heart opener in the sense of how you feel towards others.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar experience in the same class that was going on in the studio while you're in the cycle, because there was a range of activity going on in the studio as well with the low impact class. And looking around, there's some that are just, just jumping and crazy. And then there's others that are doing very minimal range, just trying to get the feet, and such a respect. They're in that room, such a respect for each one, knowing each one has a story, supporting each one, really is, and I think that's a huge part of that empathy, is to respect each soul within the context of their story. Not within the context of my story or anyone else's story, but to have the feeling, I don't need to know the details of their story, I just know they have one. And there is beauty in everyone growing within the context of their story, but growth doesn't happen if there's no respect. So it's really a heart opener when you do this for yourself. Then again, that empathy happens towards others. So definitely very beautiful. Thank you. Any other final thoughts? It could be on Instagram, on YouTube, in real time. Anywhere from the ethers. We're okay. All right, let's end with a quick reflection. As I sit here now, I am aware that within every single human soul, at the core, there is this eternal state that can experience deep peace. It's like a subtle, invisible river within, waiting to flow. This river of peace waiting to flow. And at the heart of spirituality, it's about unlocking that capacity and maintaining it as I act and interact. The key is remembering I am a soul, an eternal, spiritual, non-physical being. Right now, as I sit here, even though I may not feel it, I am that. I'm so used to being pulled into the sensations of the body, thinking I am the body. But if I become quiet, feel the energy of the self withdrawing to a single point of awareness behind the forehead, feeling that the body is separate, like a cloak around me. And I am here, existing behind the forehead. I am eternal. This quiet, living point of awareness. This is what unlocks that river of peace within, allows it to flow. That peace is the sign that I have actually experienced the truth. From thought to feeling, experience. It only takes a second through the day, withdrawing inside, remembering, experiencing. Om Shanti. Thank you so much for joining. And until next time, I think our next public drop-in event is the meditation tomorrow evening, Sunday evening, 6:30 to 7:30. But again, check the website. World Meditation Hour. Please check the website and it will list everything that's going on. But thank you for joining this. Until next time, Om Shanti.